G'day and welcome again. Today I want to have a look with you at our Sundays. And this is in response to the Gospel text where Mark has Jesus and the disciples on a Sabbath walking through some cornfields. And while they're walking through, the disciples pick some of the corn and eat it. Perfectly legitimate, that's fine. Travellers or passers-by are allowed to do that. But the disciples see them doing that and they complain. They say to Jesus, "Why do your disciples do what is forbidden on the Sabbath?" And Jesus, knowing the context, says, "Did you never hear about David? How he went into that very temple on the Sabbath and took the loaves of offering because he and his men were hungry, and he gave them to eat, and he ate himself." And Jesus saying what David did was right. And then he says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And this takes us back to the original decalogue of instructions or invitation or recommendation for the Jewish people when they were lost in the desert. Having been rescued from centuries of slavery in Egypt. And slavery in Egypt where they had no time for themselves. They had to make bricks for Pharaoh's pyramids, temples, palaces, administrative buildings, whatever. But they had a certain number of bricks they had to make every week. And they had to find the straw, and they had to get the mud, blend them and set them and present them as bricks ready for construction. And that meant they had no free time because the demands were excessive. But here in this decalogue of instruction for this people who what Jesus calls in his time harassed and dejected, but as they were lost in the desert, God gives them these 10 instructions for living. Honour your God, love your parents, don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, etc. And the fourth one of those is keep holy the Sabbath day. Now this is an anti-slavery recommendation. Break with that tradition of working 7 days every week of the year. Take one day to stop, to listen, to reflect, to stock take, if you like. But one day of rest, one day given to God and to you to live better. It's a beautiful instruction. It's a beautiful, sensitive awareness that God has for his people. But then, of course, in Jesus' time, the religious leaders had surrounded that recommendation, calling it a commandment, with laws and frivolous little anecdotes. In other words, to be faithful to the Sabbath, you had to limit the distance you walked, you had to leave your animals without water, all these sort of things, so as to keep the Sabbath, which, as Jesus shows so clearly, was not God's intention. And David practiced that and did it right. They were instructions for living. And so it is with us today. We have the Sunday, the first day of the week, which is the Lord's Day, because that was the day on which God raised Jesus to new life and us with him. And we celebrate that. Yeah. And some people, of course, gather together. Some people gather together in a building. And those people nourish one another. They reflect together on who they are, where they are, why they are, and gives them strength and encouragement for the next week. And some people just simply stop and have a break with their family. Some people make sure that's the day when they visit. But the invitation I think that God is giving us is to stop and be aware of who you are, where you are, why you are, and who is God. There's a lovely saying that in the scriptures, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that God is God. And God is not just another being amongst many beings. God is being, absolute, infinite, eternal, and present. So I invite you to take Sundays as an invitation. Take Sundays as a recommendation from God to live well, to live better, and avail of that opportunity that is still incorporated in our society. That Christian root is still there. So avail of it, and remember that God is God, and God is with us, and God loves us, and He gives us recommendations for better living. God bless. See you next week.